Oh
All
yeah,
right.
that's it. Yeah.
Yeah, hello.
Hey.
Uh, Welcome to Up Close, our Q&A session. And I'm very excited today to welcome back to the UP fold Jarreau Carrillo. And he's going to be talking to us about his East Coast experience in terms of not only New York as an improv hub, but also as a filmmaker. Um, and and who knows where we'll end up going. But right now, you're currently back in Seattle.
Yep.
And it was interesting that you, well, I guess before we get into like stuff that you're doing, I would love to have you give us just a brief little detail about sort of your history with UP, but also improv and then what you've done since then.
Okay. So I went to undergrad at Morehouse College in Atlanta, Georgia. I studied. I was a poli sci major, and like I transferred from Seattle Central. I started at Seattle Central, and I transferred to Morehouse. Halfway through my time at Morehouse, I realized that I wanted to be a filmmaker and that I wanted to act in all my films, write my films too. So I was like, what, I was a big comedy guy. That was my thing. Actually, before I even decided that I wanted to be a filmmaker, on MySpace, I used to write these blogs. And before there was even like thing like a spam thing or like a clickbait or anything like that, I would post these links on people's MySpace page to my comedy blog in undergrad. And I would get crazy amount of views for something that I just wrote. And it was addictive. I didn't know what I was doing. I needed a creative outlet at the time.
Right.
And then one of my best friends came to stay with me in Atlanta, and he told me, he was like, "Oh, I'm gonna be a director now." He had moved to LA to be an actor, and he was like, "Oh, I'm gonna be a director." And I was like, "Oh, you could do that?" He's like, "Yeah, I'm gonna write a movie." So we both started trying to write a movie. Uh, um, and we didn't finish it, but I continued on, and I decided that I didn't, I was going to finish my poli sci major, and I wanted to go to NYU. I always wanted to live in New York. I always wanted to go to NYU, like ever since I was like in elementary school. Um, but so I started watching a bunch of movies and I reading a bunch of books, and but I didn't take any acting classes, and I knew I wanted to do comedy, so I figured, one of my favorite comedic actors is Bill Murray, so I was like, oh, maybe I should do improv. Um, I looked up uh, improv in Atlanta, and I just had trouble finding like any theaters at that time that were dedicated strictly to improv. And then I was like, oh, I'm going back. I can do it when I go back to Seattle. And I found Unexpected Productions, and they seemed okay. Uh, uh, I was right. I think it was. I remember there was this bar in Belltown called the Spitfire in 2008. When I moved back to Atlanta, it was before my first class, my first improv class. I was nervous as shit, and I was like, I'm gonna go have a beer real quick. I had a beer, and then I went to, actually, yeah, you taught my first improv class, and I was nervous out of my mind, but everybody, that was the thing, everybody was nervous. Like nobody knew what to expect, so it put everybody on the same page. Um, it was the best thing I ever done in my life because I started improv as a thing that was just to help me become a better actor and a better writer. And I ended up finding something that I actually like really loved, that I never would have probably done in any other circumstance. Um, and I appreciate the like starting at Unexpected Productions because it built the foundation that I have as an improviser, and a lot of the things that I use to this day. Um, yeah.
Cool. And you've continued improv even after you moved to New York, right?
So I went to undergrad at Morehouse to this day.
Yeah, right, right,
Yeah.
right. Okay. So, and we'll come back to the. I'm really curious about how you apply, sort of, or what you take from improv and apply to the film film stuff that you're doing. Um, and so, in terms of f- filmmaking and you know, I guess what you sort of it sounds like you sort of fell into it in a
Yeah,
good way.
both things. Yeah.
Yeah, into both things. Um, and first, let's talk about filmmaking. Then we can talk about improv. But what is the thing that you were surprised and loved about filmmaking that you didn't expect? And what's the thing like that just bugs you, that just bothers you, that gets in the way?
Um, as a filmmaker,
Mm-hmm.
uh, I think this was before filmmaking though. It was like I was surprised that anybody cared about what I had to say.
Hmm.
Like I was surprised that like my voice was important or that people would be interested in something that I made. I and I think that was like that's when I first saw like the Chappelle show, which was like one of the biggest things that made me start writing a comedy blog or whatever.
Right.
I felt for the first time watching on television where my perspective was reflected in the media. That was the first time in my life, and I was like, oh, maybe I could do something. I didn't know what it was, but I was like, but I knew that his point of view was similar to my point of view in some way, and I'm not sure what that means or what that was, but I just felt like we were akin to the same type of views.
Right.
Um, what else what was the question?
Well, just the thing that you really were surprised and love about filmmaking versus, and then the thing that kind of bugs you, or maybe you didn't expect it,
Yeah,
was kind of an annoyance in.
I mean, there's a lot of things that annoy me about filmmaking, to be honest. It's it's hard work. It's like crazy hard work. NYU is like the boot camp for filmmakers. It's like you make 3 films your first year at NYU, and then the second year you go into an intensive of a longer film.
Right.
Um, and like it's like getting up at like 6 o'clock every day, all the time. And the thing that I think bugs me the most is like if I have a feeling that I want to express in terms of like a film or an idea, it takes so long for me to communicate that
Right.
to the people that I want to communicate it to. And that's why I really love improv. I think that's what kept me in it was like that feeling
Right.
that it's so complex. Improv is crazily complex
Right.
because I won't even have an intention when I do improv, but I will discover what I want to express, and then I mean on a good night, I'll discover what I want to express, and then I get to have it right there, and then I could talk to people about it right afterwards. That's amazing. Film is like you have an idea, and you especially writing. Writing is I love writing, but it's the most difficult thing in the world. It's like you have an idea, and you it might be great and all of us and you just beat it to death until it's you don't know if it's good or not, and that's just it's like that's the hard thing about filmmaking, I think.
Right.
um
Okay. I
yeah.
have a crossover question then, kind of based on what you're saying,
Mhm.
because it sounds like you're talking about some, in a way, polar opposites. So, like, you get an idea for something you want to do a film about. Well,
Mhm.
okay, I have to write it. I have to get a crew. I have to get money or somebody to do it.
Mhm.
And so it's this whole process that happens. In improv, it's like, well, I just have to get on stage, right? And
Mhm.
I can do something around that. So, in terms of your personal journey, where do you cross over with improv and filmmaking? Like where, I mean, I think there's some obvious examples like improvising on the set, like, oh, we can't do that, so let's figure out a way to do this. Um, when you have the crew around, but what other things from improv have do you keep coming back to in your filmmaking?
So in my interview at NYU, like me being having an improv background set me apart from all my other interviewees. Like that was something they touched on in my interview, and I didn't think it was that big of a deal. And I still like for the first few years I didn't even understand how improv could be used in terms of filmmaking. I mean, I understand like, like you get the when improvisers are actors are improvising dialogue, but I didn't understand as a director what that meant. But also another cool thing is that Armando Diaz, the guy that one of the owners of the Magnet, he teaches a class in the film department at NYU, which was pretty surprising. I had no idea. Um, but I found that I'm just learning this now. Like I'm learning what I like. I had a writing moment the other day, and I'm actually starting to make music now. And what kept me from doing a lot of other disciplines, like why I stuck with filmmaking and instead of all the other things that I tried to do. I've tried to do a whole bunch of things, but none of them really stuck. But what kept me with it is like the ability to be able to discover things,
Mhm.
and that's what is helping me develop my voice. And the other day, I was like when I was writing, when you get writer's block, it's like one of the worst things. But whenever I put myself in the place of discovering what I'm trying to make, like while I'm writing, instead of like having like an idea of where I want to go, I find that I find what I want to say faster. And I think that's because of improv. Uh, I've done improv for a very long time, and when it doesn't work, it's when you're thinking about it, and when you're just open to discovering, open to your partners, and open to discovering. That's when you find the unexpected thing, and uh, you make something that is it's like really potent. That's where I think the crossover is for me, and it works in any discipline. And I don't know why they didn't teach me this in my first year at filmmaking at NYU, because it would have saved me a lot of time.
Right, right, right. They want you to keep coming back. That's
I know, right? It's the secret.
cool. So, and along those lines, again, kind of going back to the filmmaking thing, and then we'll kind of shift over to your improv experience and what that was like. Um, but you did a long internship with the Spike Lee, and I'm just curious about the type of environment. Does he have a spontaneous set? Is everything set? Is there any wiggle room in
Yeah.
in the way he sets stuff up, or is it just he's got everything planned and it's all executed according to that plan?
So I didn't do an internship, but I worked on
Yeah, of course.
a few of his shoots.
Ah, okay.
But he was my teacher too, so I got to see him direct, and I got to see him write too. I got to see him in the editing room. I got to see him like on every aspect
Right.
of what he does. And actually, me and one of my producers for my feature now, who went to Morehouse with me, uh, and then went to NYU with me too. Uh, we were talking about this today about working on Spike's set, and it was like he knows exactly what he wants to do, but like I was telling my friend Julius, that's his
Mhm.
name. I was like, I have no idea how he's choosing these shots, because he gets these shots, and he gets a lot of coverage. First of all, he gets a lot of coverage, but also everything is so deliberate, and he never like checks a book or anything. And I'm like, how is this guy, is he just doing this by mind, by his memory, or is he making it up as he goes? But everything is so specific and deliberate, it can't be made up. And I don't know, I'd never even asked him, because I don't want to get one of those answers like, you got to get the coverage, this is what you're supposed to, it's easy, because it's probably is easy to him because he's done it for so long.
Right. Right. But is he open to ideas or discoveries?
Well, I don't know about that in terms of like shot selection. Do you mean shot selection or like collaboration with actors?
Right. I well, I guess I would assume, based on what you're saying,
Hmm.
and correct me if I'm wrong, that shot selection and stuff like that, he knows what he wants. But in terms of the collaboration with the actors, which is a little more fluid and a little closer to the improvised stage, is he?
So yeah, so I'll say this. This is one thing he said in class, which was makes a lot of sense. he was like, there, somebody asked him in class, it was, we were watching Malcolm X, and it was the scene where Malcolm's shot in class. And I don't want to say the woman's name wrong. I forget the actor's name, and I know if Spike ever sees this, he would like berate me. And Angela Bassett, because I always get Lynn Winfield and Angela Bassett mixed up. Angela Bassett, the wife of Malcolm X, um, her character responds in the scene where he shot like she does. She has a great performance, and somebody in the class asked how he got that performance from her, and this is was his response in like paraphrasing. He was like, directing is, you don't gotta do a lot to direct. You just cast. You cast the right actor, and you trust them to do their job. And that makes the most sense.
Right.
That makes the most sense. It just cast perfectly, and that's, I live by that. It's like I write my characters for a specific actor, which is it's not always the best thing, but it already the 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 actors already have a unique perspective because they're a real person that I know of, you know. So I think when it comes with improvising, I've never seen him give a direction to it on set, and I've been on two of his sets. I was on Black Klansman, and I was on no, I was just on Black Klansman. I was in the writer's room, and She's Gotta Have It as an assistant. Uh, but I didn't see him talk to the DP really. I didn't see him talk to the actors really, but he rehearses too, like a lot before the shoots. So he would do like a few weeks, a week or two of rehearsals. So I'm not, and they're always closed. So I wouldn't even know that.
Right. Right. Right.
Yeah.
Okay. So, uh, and for yourself as a filmmaker,
Mhm.
how do you? I mean, we talked a little bit about incorporating sort of improvisation and improvisational technique and things like the writing and things like that. But in terms of your sets when you're shooting, and I know you do documentaries, but if you're doing, let's say, something that you've written or something that someone else has written, what kind of set do you like? Do you like an open set that's open to ideas, or do you feel the same way of like I know what I want and I'm going to get that?
I I That's a good question. I write specifically, but I know because like I said, I write for the character,
Right.
or for the actor, in mind, and I know what their voice should be like, but I don't know I don't what write isn't always what they would actually say all the time. So if they're giving me, and I try to use my, I don't even know what it is, but if it doesn't ring true to me in some way, then I always do a take where it's like, let's stick to the script as rehearsals, you know, just for us to get into it. And then whether it be before or during the shoot. But then also, like, I have a video, an example of a web series I made with one of my friends, Miguel, who got me into filmmaking. Uh, he's a, he's like one of the funniest people I know, and he's really spontaneously funny. So like, if I know that about you, then I know that I'll think of some, when I'm writing, I'll think of something funny, which I think is funny, but then I'll just be like, I know he's probably gonna say something else. So like, I'll keep that in mind, and I'll encourage him to be spontaneous and like do what he feels like.
Mm-hmm.
Just so I have a whole bunch of options. But in this, like, and also that's another thing. Like this in this episode, I could send it to you. It's a lot of the things he says in it are things that he's actually said in real life. So
Right.
I just write down what he's, and he'll get mad. He'll read a script that I wrote for him. He'll be like, "Man, are you just writing what I said?" It's like, "Yeah, you're funny, man." But I think with that, like writing something that writing things for people that would actually be doing or saying those things in a heightened sense, it allows them the opportunity to be themselves, I think.
Right.
But here's an episode, and there you could tell it's like the the way it's like the dialogue is, it's like it's very staticky, like any sentence can be plugged in there or taken out and it'll still work because we do a lot of improv on set.
Cool. And it's okay to share this, right?
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah.
I'll post it on. I'll post it on there. Let's see. Cool. So, obviously, I'm assuming that when you went to school in New York, originally you were perhaps like most of us when we first go to school or college, a bit overwhelmed with stuff. How long had you been in New York before you started, you know, doing improv?
Oh man, right away. I
Really?
emailed you. I emailed you. I don't know
Yeah.
if you remember. That was a big it was a big thing for me, man. I wanted to get better really fast.
Right.
And for me it's like going on stage. So I started school in August or September. I moved out to New York in August or September and I started in December. Started doing improv in December. Whenever I had like my first break or whatever, and I didn't want to have time, any lapse of time.
Right.
Um, so yeah,
So you're just keeping busy.
yeah, definitely.
Cool. And then kind of shifting back towards the improv side of it. A lot of different improv schools, at the time, especially in New York. What did you think the differences in the philosophies were? I know you did some stuff at UCB. I know you did
Mhm.
stuff at Magnet, and I'm sure you saw stuff at other places.
Yeah.
I mean, what kind of differences were going on in the scene at that time?
So coming from Unexpected Productions, it's like it's more theatrical a bit, and it feels like more of improv purism. I feel like, um, and going to New York at that time. So I went to the Magnet. Uh, I think before I moved to New York, and that was like whenever oh yeah, it was during when I went for my interview.
Mm-hmm.
I went for my interview and I went to the UCB and then I went to the Magnet, and the UCB was awesome because the audience was like ridiculous. It was like it felt like a party or something. I don't know. It's hard to explain, and it felt like you were watching TV on on stage. But then I went to the Magnet and I saw this team called the Boss, and it was I saw a mono scene for the first time. I'd never seen a mono scene before, and I was watching them on stage, and it was like 4 minutes in, and no one had left the scene, and I was like, what's going on right now? Is somebody gonna edit the scene or leave or something? They did like a 30-minute show, a 30-minute show in all with all the characters in the same scene the entire show, and it blew my mind because I just never seen that form before. And I quickly understood that when I started taking classes at the UCB and at um, the Magnet. I think it's not just uh, that the philosophies are different; it's the environment is so different. Like people go to the UCB or they go to the UCB because not only because they want to learn improv, but then there's that thing is like, oh, I want to be famous or I want to be on SNL, and I didn't have those. I never had those intentions with improv. I just like doing it, and I I didn't really like that type of vibe. I mean, there's nothing wrong with it. That competition, it probably makes people better, but it seemed like there was less of that at the Magnet because there was less people, and it was kind of like it was like this hidden thing for a while when I first started. It felt like that, like, oh, maybe not that many people know about it. But I mean, that changed over the years. Quickly, it changed. But the philosophies seemed a little bit different at the Magnet than it did at well, it seemed more similar to Unexpected Productions, in my opinion, about just the things that they talk about. The Magnet's really on be who you are, and um, finding things organically. The On the other hand, the UCB, like, they'll give like a this paper. I got this paper for one of the classes, which was like a formula to finding the game of the scene and how to. It was like it'll like blow your mind. It's a lot to think about, especially when you're first starting as an improviser. Um, but Also that, and the style of comedy is different from New York and Seattle. I think that um, Seattle is a little bit more laid back. There's in terms of the style of improv, it's more like we can do something or we could not do something. We could, it just has that type of vibe. Whereas New York, everything is like, and I just went to go see some shows in LA too, and I've never seen them before. But in New York, it's more like faster pace. It's a faster pace of improv, where it feels like a lot of times like the the energy. It's like it feels like the improvisers are trying to keep up with the spirit of improv, like they're just running and doing. And I like it. It's a cool thing. But it was a transition for me. It was a transition for me going from how Seattle's more laid back style going, and a little bit more theatrical style, going to that, which was more like, especially the UCB was like more like trying to be like, or not trying to be, or they're more like stage to television type style kind of. And in LA, I think is like almost like completely, it's like even further along that way from my experience. Uh, it was a hard transition. It was hard just getting people to understand where I was coming from, especially like teachers and uh, and other people that had to make decisions about who would get on teams. Um, I didn't under so I felt like I had to understand uh, multiple styles to learn to be able to communicate with, because if people don't understand the language you're speaking, they're not going to be able to know if you're funny or not. So that was a really difficult thing for me. It took me like a few years to understand that the style, and the only thing that changed it was me watching a bunch of shows, just watching a lot of shows. I would go like 3 or 4 times a week. It was me and two other guys that were at every single show almost, and we became friends.
Right. It's always like, I often talk about how, improv is our language, but all these different places have different dialects
Yeah, exactly.
you have to learn if you're going to be successful. Uh,
Yeah.
how did you feel the environment was uh, as far as, I mean, it sounds like you fell in with a good group who was very supportive, but the
Uh-huh.
overall scene, uh, would you call it supportive, or do you think people were kind of basically taking care of themselves, trying to move to whatever the next thing was?
I've never seen improv in Chicago before, but what I understand from it, what I hear from other people, it sounds like the indie scene is like it's like huge, or it was at some point. And it seemed like more, um, it's like if you didn't get on a team, I think that's what it was. It was like there were so many people going for slots on a 3 or 4 theaters that there were so many people left out that they had to create another scene for themselves. And New York, I don't think ever got to that place, because if you didn't get on a team, everybody was still fighting for stage time in 3 theaters. And then like also I think it's this the probably the just the location of things is like all the shows were in Midtown Manhattan, close to Times Square. So everybody agreed that we could meet at that place, and that was an okay place to try to have shows at, but trying to get an indie space around that area is difficult. There's so much space around Manhattan that a show, I remember like having to do a show once in Manhattan and once in Queens, like like just traveling that distance is like to an indie show is like it's like my not like I'm exhausted just from that, and I had to work a whole day, you know. So it's like I think that's what that why the indie scene doesn't thrive in New York that as well as I wish. One of my friends, Caitlin Steitzer, she used to do shows in her apartment, which had this feel, which I thought was like really cool. It had a feel that it felt like it was indie, and it felt um like not secret, but it felt uh like it was you were on the verge of something cool that other people might not know about. But even though I know that wasn't her intention to to do those shows, but I know she though that was a spark. I think it it was a spark in the indie scene. I think I wish the indie scene was better in New York, but I think it just it makes people want to. I think people just rather be on a main stage. That main stage time is very precious because if you can't perform in front of a lot of people, you'll never get you'll never get used to being in front of people. I think.
Right. And so you think it's the drive of the improvisers wanting to be in front of a more established main stage improv audience versus, like you're saying, rent or finding a space. Do you think it's
Yeah,
driven by the improvisers wanting to like, no, if I do this indie thing, I'm not going to be able to get my crack at being on the main stage, or do you think it's more just space related? It's hard to find spaces, and
I think it's all those things. I think uh, one producing shows is really hard work. Like getting people to come to your show is like very difficult work. And then especially, and then add on top of it, it's like somewhere in deep in Brooklyn. It's like, oh man, I don't even know that area, you know? So it's like if you're doing these shows that it's just like you know you're gonna get an audience or you're gonna get at least
right.
a good handful of people at a main stage theater. And then you want to be part of the in crowd, like it's fun, you know?
Yeah,
So
yeah. I think it's interesting. I also think that something like in Seattle Improv, maybe this is too strong, but it's in a way people take for granted the fact that there are spaces where people can perform on a pretty regular basis. It's not as, at least in my experience, it's not as difficult to find a form to perform in. And we kind of, in a way, take it for granted here that we have all these opportunities to potentially get on stage.
yeah, I think that's the good thing about Seattle is like there are a lot of places that are willing to do that. I produced a show last year at the Pocket uh, with one of my friends, Ben Steitzer, and that was really pretty successful. And I think they didn't even expect that many people to show up to the show. And it was fun. It was just like it was just stressful and like it wasn't I didn't want to put myself through that again that soon, you know. If there was, it's like sometimes I mean, they have a pretty cool infrastructure there, but it's sometimes like when you have shows at places that do offer space, you kind of have to create the infrastructure too, which is
Yeah.
it's a difficult thing.
Well, and it's hard if you're not familiar with the lay of the land, so to speak.
Yeah, exactly. Like that day, I met my you know the lighting technician and the DJ, and I never even been seen the stage before to the day that we performed. So
Yeah, it was weird. I had the kind of reverse experience, which is one time I produced an improv show in co-produced actually in New York,
hmm
not knowing
yeah,
where to go or who to I mean it was just exhausting
yeah,
to figure it
yeah.
out.
It was rewarding at the end, but the weeks prior were like, I got too many other things to worry about. You know, like I don't want to worry about like this show failing. You know.
Right, right, right. And how does that relate kind of shifting back to like your film experience in terms of getting money to produce films, and you know, obviously you have a network of people that you can use in terms of the creative aspect. Now, I also assume you have people who are more than willing to support and help you, you know, get money and raise whatever you need to raise in order to do that. But is it similar in terms of how it feels, or is it a totally different animal?
What do you mean?
Well, I mean, not even like the making part, so not even the creative part, but the
Mhm.
behind the scenes part of,
Like how it feels? Like, what do you mean? Like how it feels? Is it similar to how it?
well, it's like producing a
Yeah.
stage show
Oh. Oh, yeah.
and
Uh,
money for a film, right?
I think there's more at stake in films because you need so much more money, you know? I think, and also it's like you're producing a product. I mean, it depends. Like, I guess if it's a reoccurring show, that's a different thing. But if it's a one-time show, it's like gone, like, and there's not a lot of potential to make money from it afterwards,
Right,
at
right.
least to my knowledge.
Process versus product. I see.
Yeah. A lot of like just getting in the conversation of like I mean I haven't even started. I'm just starting like approaching financing for the film, but a lot of the conversations are about we need to make a return, which is like something I don't really want to think about as an artist, I don't want to think about
Okay, yeah.
like how, like how, and I don't think that's at stake at in not a big stake in producing a show. You could cover if you get enough people there, and then the opportunity cost isn't as high as it is like putting up money to make a
Right.
film.
Well, it's also the, yeah. I mean, what you just said makes total sense because like people ask me about producing, you know, stage stuff, either improv shows or plays or whatnot, and half jokingly, I always say the first thing you need to determine is how much money can I lose,
Yeah. Yeah.
right, in producing this show, and kind of start from there. Like, okay, you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
bottom is if I lose that amount. If I lose more than that, then uh-oh. But I'm willing to take a chance, and I can go this far into it. But ideally, hopefully, you're going to make some money or at least break even.
Yeah.
In film, it's kind of
Well,
done up front. If I understand correctly, you're sort of
I think you, yeah, that is a actual closer connection though, because a lot of the times, a lot of films just only break even. I don't think they intend to do that, but I think that's what ends up happening, and that's like that's a successful film if you break even.
right.
I mean, you want to have um, some profit, but you know, having a loss on a film is like it won't end your career, but I can imagine that would suck really bad. um, but the thing is, the feeling, I think you're right, is the feeling is the same though. Like every film that I've made or shot, uh, like the day before, or even performing in a show, actually, like I still get anxiety about performing in a show.
Right.
Um, but it's like until it starts, like the moment I say something in a show, or the moment I start directing and we get one shot, like I'm super stressed because I just want it to go good, and that feeling is regardless what level it's on is the same, and
Right.
it eases as soon as I get into it, like 100%.
Right. Yeah. So I mean, again, kind of. I mean, I think if I'm understanding you correctly, you're commenting on again the process of doing. And
Yeah,
I guess the difference is at the end of the day on a film, you have product that you can then craft and edit and then put out. Whereas in improv, it just kind of all just disappears.
yeah, yeah.
Um, yeah, that's
That's
interesting.
a cool thing about it, but um, that's the bad thing is one of my teachers at the magnet, he always describes this scene which he thinks is like or this show, which was like the perfect show, I guess. And it was like it was about, I guess it was a, I guess it was like one of those, I forget what it's called, that thing when that game when you're in improv and everybody does a sound and everybody does a sound and they build a like a
Machine.
groups. Yeah, yeah, I think so. And somebody was making it was like a ding 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 ding. It was all these sounds at the end of the show, and nobody really knew what was happening. It was like an organic improv. Nobody knew what was going on, and then somebody came on stage and was like, I guess they they contextualized what was going on, and they said I think they swiped everyone off, and he was a guy at a desk, and he was looking at his computer, and he was like, why isn't this thing working? And I guess he like tried to open it up, and everybody rushes back on stage and does the thing again. And I was like, he always describes that it sounds great, it sounds amazing, and it's a good example to use, but I guarantee it was not even 100% as mind blowing as it is seeing that on stage, like to see
Right.
that
Right.
or perform that.
Right. Yeah. Being in the moment,
Yeah,
being there in the room.
yeah.
Yeah. So we were talking a little bit beforehand, and I know you're now back in Seattle, and you're also working on getting some documentary film
Oh yeah.
on the protests and around CHOP and things like that. And so you've been around shooting. I'm just wondering, in terms of, because you're, we were sort of saying, sort of last minute you hear about something happening, and all of a sudden you have to go out and
Yeah.
eat some stuff. So I'm wondering about the improv component to that, in terms of how to shoot, what to shoot, where to shoot, how maybe improv influences that in your work.
Yeah, I have to so I'm shooting on film, so I have to be super decisive on what I choose, um and also have to, yeah, on when I go out. So I'll watch at Twitch. I'll watch Twitch for the day when I know that there's going to be a bunch of protests, or I know that people are going to be gathering together. And then I'll watch what's going on, and I'll just look at images. I'll look at the images because I'm shooting silent film, but still it's the images. I just try to let the images lead me or whatever, and I'll try to look at what seems, if there's nothing like pressing going on, and I don't know what, nothing really seems, but I feel like I should shoot. I'll see what images seem like good images just to look at, and then I'll go out and try to get there before those. Like for example, there was a bunch of Trump supporters that came in town last week, or right like a day after CHOP was dissolved or whatever. And oh no, 4th of July. It was 4th of July, and they're just they're marching in Capitol Hill, and a bunch of anti-Trump supporters went up there too. And I knew that was going to be an event that I should cover, but I can't really. It's hard to communicate what's going on to people when it's just about ideas. So the most important thing for me to shoot was like, a guy, the guy with the huge American flag that's just waving around, and then shoot that specifically, 3 or 4 seconds of that, and then go from there and let that lead to whatever else I shoot, or whatever seems like I can't, I I don't want to miss some things, especially in this type of environment. I won't shoot, because even if I want to, because I think it would put somebody in danger, or put me in danger, or I don't want to exploit people. Like there was a confrontation between a guy who was, I assume was on drugs, but he was talking erratically. He was going wild, and they kicked him out. They, like the security or whatever, they kicked him out, and he was angry about it. And he was on the border. He was on Pine and 10th and Pine, or 11th and Pine, wherever the precinct is. He was like exiting out. And then there was a lady who was, I don't think she was security or anything, but she was standing on one of the barricades, and the guy started approaching her like aggressively, and I think he had like a pitchfork or something weird. He had something like dangerous. I don't know what it was, but then the girl revealed she had a gun in her waistband, which I was like, this is probably gold. I should probably shoot it, but I would not. I feel uncomfortable about
Right.
putting that out or even shooting it because they could be in danger. They didn't have masks on, and I don't want anybody to see that afterwards. So
Right. Right. And in terms of this stuff that you're shooting, are you, I guess, going in with an idea as to what you want to do with it, or are you sort of just, I need to document this, and then something will arise out of what I'm shooting?
so I'm shooting on Super 8, and I'm shooting on a film stock that was it no longer existed, but it was brought back, I think, in 2016 or 14. I think it's called Ektachrome. It's a color reversal, and it was used widely in the 70s and the 80s, I believe, for like documentary shoots and like news shows. And so it's gonna have a look up from the 70s and 80s type feel of like a media type thing. So I loosely know that I want to create this short piece that creates this nostalgic vibe of this era that we're going through right now. And I don't know what's going to happen, the events that are going to happen, but I know that I just have to capture striking images related to the subject matter that would make it give it the vibe of watching like the civil rights movement in the 60s on your television, you know? So that's kind of what I want to do in this time, but I don't know what's going to happen. So,
Okay. Um, so shifting a bit of time here um, at the end, but over the last few weeks, we've had a number of discussions around this notion of diversity and inclusion and Black Lives Matter, and I'm just wondering what your experience has been in New York, and what's worked and what's not worked, or is it a big deal? Is it not a big deal? It's interesting because a couple of weeks ago, I was talking to Dan O'Connor, who's a white American, but he was talking about how interesting it is to find himself in a position or their group in a position where it's a predominantly white group in Los Angeles, which
yeah.
is there you go, millions of people and lots of different ethnicities there, but to end up with that kind of group. But what was your experience in New York in terms of the vibe and the feel, and whether things were encouraged or discouraged, or
So like one thing that struck a chord with me was when I heard Chris Rock talk about being on SNL. He was talking about how it's hard to get sketches because a lot of writers will work with other actors that not necessarily they think are the funniest, but they'll just work with people that understand each other. Like they have a shorthand just because you're a white person, they speak the same dialect, like we were talking about before. And being a black person, it feels like you're already um, set back because of that on that show. And that's kind of how I feel in improv in general. It's like I always have to speak multiple languages, you know? It's first of all, there wasn't a lot of black improvisers in New York when on the main stages. When when I first started in New York, there was, I mean, you could count within maybe like two handfuls, and that never bothered me. I always thought that that's going to be the situation, um, just because television reflects the same thing. Um, but I didn't know how much it would come into play. Not, I just got really frustrated after auditioning. I think for me, one, they didn't understand my style, I think, of improv at that time, coming from Unexpected Productions. And then also I think it was just like we just didn't we didn't have like a collective commonality that was specific. Like I was talking to Tony Beeman about it, about the game I used to hate the most was that game where everyone stands in a circle and someone was, I think it was not monologue hotspot, song hotspot. I don't know what to call it. I forgot what it was called, but this person goes in the middle, they sing a song, and then somebody tags them out when they get an idea for a new song, and everyone sings along with that person singing that song. I hated that game because I never knew the songs that everybody else were singing. Like no one, I was always singing like R&B and rap songs, and nobody knew. Like I didn't know. I didn't listen to Iggy Pop, back then. But that's how I felt in general in terms of improv. Like I felt like I didn't share not only on stage but also afterwards. Like I don't think I bonded as quickly with the teachers or with other students as fast as I would with people that might be minorities. And we might share I like common backgrounds in high school or whatever. And which was, so when I started there, I think there were a few minorities on the main stage, on the main stages, and but a whole flood of a new class of people started taking classes at the magnet, like, and we all came up together, and it was pretty diverse. But I think my improv team, my indie team, is an all Black improv team. I have a team called Old English, and I'm in a duo with Shakotha. Me and Shakotha actually performed at Unexpected Productions. Mm-hmm. But we're all Black, and you kind of like bond together when you're in this situation. Like you feel like an outsider, you know, and you find that to you like to uh you like to it's easy when you're directing, you don't want to have to tell a DP which, like, you want a shot and then have to explain why you want that shot. They should, like, it's better if they just know why you want that shot. Oh yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, perfect, let's do it. If you have to explain your intention behind a move in a scene, it's so much more difficult. That's being on a Herald team was like the most difficult experience I had in improv. uh, I was on another team, which was with it's a Thursday night show team, and it was with they had the most minorities on that team, I think, than maybe any other team that I ever seen at any theater. Um, but it was really fun. It was really fun. We got to play with ideas like that. One of my friends, Darren Washington, he initiated a scene, and he said I was in the house and he initiated as he was like an AI, and he wasn't Alexa, he was Alexis, and it was like, it was like a Black woman, and I can't and I instantaneously, boom, I knew what it was, so I was feeding his idea. First of all, I can't imagine that a white American would make that move without some ridicule, but also like a white American responding to that. It's a slippery slope. It's kind of, you you don't want to. You can explore more ideas that you might not be able to explore with a diverse group of people, and then when you find things that burden you in your regular life that you can't really talk about in improv because it might make your other castmates uncomfortable to talk about it. I think it's a really stifling experience. And no one's ever said that, you know, like if I did a scene that initiated a scene where there were slaves in the scene, um, I've done that before, and I've gotten a vibe where it was like, oh, we're scared, you know, we're cautious to make moves, and then it makes things weird. Um, but I feel comfortable playing those scenes, but a white American may not feel comfortable playing those scenes, you know, either in any position. And when you're able to explore those things with other people that are comfortable to do that, it just makes improv more free. And I think that was one thing that I was really missing from, and it's not anyone's fault. It was just there's a lack of diversity in improv in general, I think.
Right. And do you think along those lines, in terms of your experience, especially with being in an all black group, uh, do you feel improv's prepared for that? I mean, is it welcoming in terms of being open to it, or did you feel a little bit of resistance to not only the stuff you're doing on stage in terms of the topics of scenes, but also just the fact that, oh, it's this all ethnic team, and and because the history of improv, at least in North America, I mean, it's predominantly a bunch of white guys who kind of laid the rules out, and so and I see from time to time, whether it's through people's ages, genders, beliefs, whatever, people having meeting some sort of resistance on the way. Did you feel that, or do you feel like
No,
improv's?
I no, I think that people want that. I think everyone wants that, but there have been situations where it was like this is an all black improv team, and you're playing black characters that are like, you know, like maybe somewhat stereotypical black characters, and you kind of in your mind you're like, what, hold on, what are people laughing at though? And that to have to think about that, I think that's really tough. And especially when you're performing for a mostly white audience, I I don't think the answer is um I think you have to go through that, and you have to be bold and make and just do what you feel is right. Um, but I think there is I don't think there's hesitation from the theaters or the community, but I think there is some conscious like decision making in terms of like me personally, especially being an all black team. I know I've had conversations with some of my teammates about some of the things that we won't do on stage, and not I'm not sure specifically what it was, but we we're conscious about the way we look, especially performing as a all black group in front of mostly white people. And I think that's I don't know. I think it's just something we just have to be conscious about, not only in improv, but as a black people in America.
Yeah. Well, there's so many factors that go into it. I mean, and even like in a mixed group, if you and I were to do a scene, and one of these topics were to come up, it's this idea of like you completely trusting me and me completely trusting you to take care of each other in the scene, and then also that the scene's going to have some sort of relevancy, and something to say, that it's not just being done because we can, or it's an easy laugh, or uh, you know that kind of stuff. And I think that's the kind of level of trust that we're um, talking about, and it's hard to find, at least in my experience, uh, and you can let me know your experience. It's hard to find between any improvisers sometimes, to really just you've got my back. you know
Yeah, I think yeah, I've had um yeah, it's a really difficult thing, and I think that's who you find the best chemistry with are people that you already trust before, like you just, and I think that's what that shorthand thing was like, when you just have you communicate freely in regular life, and especially on racial topics in terms of content, like improv scenes, we're not comfortable talking about that in in our in our regular lives. So like we can't expect that it's going to be comfortable when we see it in a scene. I
Right.
think, especially as the actor, not as the character.
Right.
Um, but um, yeah, yeah, I think the trust is crucial. But and it doesn't matter what you're talking about. Yeah, if you don't trust somebody, I might not get into. No, I think I would. I would explore it, but then I would comment a lot about the scene. If it was something like that, I feel like that I didn't trust the person, and I felt like this has a. I've seen it on stage a bunch of times. I used to host mixers at the Magnet, and when you get unexperienced people, sometimes what they think is comedy is not usually what it is. Sometimes people think saying offensive things is comedy, you know, and you have to in a you can't. It's a weird thing. And in a mixer, it's not. There's the stakes aren't that high, but you still can't. It's still a stage where people, you know, that where this theater is represented by what's on stage, you know, and you can't have people touching people and doing saying weird or things that may offend people. So it's like I think it's like it's about like where how this is like I've never really learned how to deal with things like this. Is like when there's a topic in a scene or you think something might be crossing the line. I never learned how to deal with that type of thing. I really don't know how to. And I think it's just like some of the most clever improvisers that are able to like kind of like jujitsu that type of thing. Um, yeah, I think trust is like one of those. It's like talking about chemistry. Basically, it's like it's hard to explain it, um, but you know what it is when you have it.
Right. Cool. All right. Well, we can wrap stuff up, but I am interested. I sent out the link to the video that you sent um, to the audience on Facebook, so hopefully they'll check that out. But are there other places we can go to see some more of your work? Or
That channel, the channel that it's that video is connected to, I have a whole series on there. They can watch that, and I'm gonna be putting more stuff on there this fall. So if they
okay,
subscribe, they'll see a lot more content.
okay, so that's sort of the hub of
Mhm.
where your work's appearing right now.
Yep.
And are you planning on doing any improv? Uh, Hopefully, while you're in Seattle.
Yeah. I'm always wanting to. So that was the thing for me was that improv was never my end goal. And there was a point where I was just staying in New York just to do improv, which probably wasn't the best decision for my career or my life. Um, yeah, that was the other thing that happened after I that jobs ended. I lost one of the jobs, and I lost my apartment. My team got cut too, so that was like the dagger. Uh,
Right, New York.
uh,
Side.
but I made a conscious decision recently. After that, actually, that was I need to focus on. I have my career, my film career hasn't started. The reason why this whole thing started was because I wanted to be a filmmaker, and I just need to I'm trying to focus on just getting my first feature made. And I'm like, I always want to perform, but I'm more like about doing like, the duo show or
Cool.
things like that don't have a lot of stakes. So
Right. So more for fun and relaxation and
exactly.
taking care of yourself. Cool. Well, Jarreau, thank you so much for doing
Yep.
this. I'd like to thank Jarreau. I have a couple of housekeeping things, and then we'll let you guys go. One is, again, if you enjoyed this, please feel free to make a donation to unexpectedproductions.org. The link is still there in the feed for Facebook. Um, Again, special thanks to Jarreau. Tonight we have a show. Indigenous Productions is doing their show Land Back. It's a all indigenous movement scripted piece. It's not improvised, but it's fascinating to watch, and it's very spontaneous in its feeling to it. So I hope you'll come back and check that out. Um, and we have more shows next weekend. We have open improv next weekend, and register for classes if you can. And last but not least, just a personal word to Jill Ferris, wishing you well. Everyone from Unexpected Productions here is sending you our love, and hope you feel better very soon. So, anyway, thank you guys so much. Again, your time is the best gift of all, especially in these things. And I'll be back again next week with another guest. So, take care.